recording. You know what, Craig? I did it again. Look, the one thing I didn't do is I didn't update the slide for the first thing. So I did everything else. So there you go. Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Think with a Drink. No, we're not doing traditional IRA versus IRA. This week we are doing being the CEO of You Incorporated. And we'll explain that in a little bit. We'll get off that slide so we can at least focus on what we're doing here this evening. The pre-flight checklist, Craig, for everybody out there. So the event is being recorded. The microphones are muted. You don't have to worry about your cameras because we're only sharing what's on the screen and what's being shown. There is, however, a chat box. So if you do have questions, please feel free to drop those into the chat box. And my co-pilot, who I will introduce in a second, is here to keep me on pace for this evening. Speaking of those pilots for tonight, my name is Tom Alessi. I am the president of the Aries Foundation. I have been in financial services. I am now in my 24th year. I'm an investment advisor. That means that I act as a fiduciary whenever I'm giving guidance or advice to any of my clients. I want to bring my vice president, Craig, if you would introduce yourself.
Sure. So I'm Craig Richardson. I'm the vice president of the Aries Foundation. I've been in financial services 19 plus years, and I specialize in work with families and individuals to help them define their financial goals and have a better relationship with their money.
And Craig will be joining me this evening as we go along on this journey, but he's also here to man any questions that come up in the chat box, or make sure that if I'm rolling on or what is that, tumbling down the rabbit hole, that Craig is at least pulling me back and keeping me focused as we go along. We told you to Think Was a Drink is sponsored by the Aries Foundation for Financial Education. You can visit us on the web. It's www.ariesfoundation.org. We're a nonprofit dedicated to the mission of trying to help everyone have a better relationship with their money. Because whether you realize it or not, you are in a relationship with money. And just like every other personal relationship that you have in your life, there are certain behaviors and triggers that occur that cause you to act sometimes a little irrationally when we're dealing with our money and our finances. That's all we try to do, myself, Craig, the rest of the Aries team. Part of this is trying to help everybody sort of understand that, define it, and learn from when those behaviors occur so that we can, Craig, right, change the behavior into the future.
Right. We know better, we do better, right?
There we go. Yes. So there's a lot of words on the screen that we don't, you can read them if you want to. Basically, they're the disclosures that just says, we're a nonprofit. We do this for educational and informational purposes only. We share all of these recordings, and all we ask is that if you're going to share them, you do so in an educational manner. Though myself, Craig, and the rest of the Aries team will always recommend that if you have a question, whether it is a tax, legal, or financial matter, that you seek out the help of a professional. Now we get to the fun part of the evening, that is, we call this Think with a Drink. Because too often and a lot of times for most people, Craig, that we tend to sit with and talk to, finances, money, it tends to be I don't want to say daunting, but challenging, overwhelming sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's managing your day-to-day budget or finances is not something that people typically, jump out of bed and do first thing in the morning because they're excited to do it, right?
Right.
It's a necessary evil. That's what what it is. So,
and a lot of times what we find is that people feel intimidated by some of the industry, the jargon, and the terminology, and everything gets thrown around. So what Craig and I try to do is take it all out. We're trying to make this as casual and relaxed and down to earth as we can. And honestly, we can't think of a better way to do that. And if we have something cold to sip on as we're doing it. And for tonight's event, I've got Ride On. Now, this is a hazy hoppy IPA that proudly puts the 7.5% in big orange dot right on the front of that can, as you can see. 7.5% ABV. Around the ring on the top are all the different hops that they have thrown in during the process of making this. Comes from our folks at Golden Road. They had brought us, we drank their mango cart last year. So they're definitely in the more citrus, and certainly the hazy IPAs tend to be that. They tend to be the very I want to say melony, but citrusy in terms of the flavor, and they're hazy and hoppy. Food pairings, definitely the grill. It's definitely the season for dealing with hazy IPA stuff on the grill roast chickens and burgers and stuff like that. A little bit of spice, because you can offset it with that big bold citrus or melon flavor that comes from it. What are you drinking tonight?
I got you beat, because the one I'm drinking is 8% alcohol by volume. And that comes from our friends at Treehouse. It's called Electric Skies. This is actually an American double IPA.
See, now that's where you start getting into. I can smell the citrus, right? Just from the pour, I can smell the citrus on this.
Yeah. And like you said, you got to pour straight down, right? It's okay to get ahead on that beer.
Well, that's what you want to do. Skål.
Skål.
Yeah, definitely getting that, that big melon, that citrus blast from that. Okay, moving on. So the agenda, you incorporated, and this whole idea is that you are the CEO of you. And so what does that look like, or what, more to the point, is what does a typical CEO's benefit package look like? And how can you sort of set that up for yourself without being the actual CEO of a company? I mean, if you are, great, and you're in the audience, tremendous. But otherwise, for the average person, how can you do this? How can you figure that out? And we'll go through some of the things that are available to you and some of the ways that you might be able to take advantage of that, and then build it out. So we're going to start with the typical CEO structure for compensation, Craig, right? Besides base pay, for W-2 employees, the base pay is base pay. You're not going to be able to change that in the, basically in the short run, if you will. But for benefits, right? What else do CEOs get, right? Besides, the normal medical and disability and, a matching retirement plan. You got life insurance, stock options, paid travel, a company car, a personal retirement plan. And a lot of times, because we run into this, they will actually do financial planning or make financial planning a perk for that CEO, COO, CFO individual, right? We see that with companies.
Right, because they realize that, those with that kind of responsibility, sometimes having the time to manage your own finances can become difficult to find. And having it under control gives them a more ability to, focus on their job. So.
Right, and do other things. And so we're going to sort of go through this and look at each of them and sort of break it down again, how this sort of can relate to you, and thinking of this from your own sort of, all right, I'm my own CEO. Do I have the benefits package that goes along with that? And, the first thing that comes up with this, if you are the CEO of You Incorporated, excuse me, right? What do we hear all the time, Craig? I already have benefits from my employer. Why does this matter to me?
Right.
And here's the thing. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. You had something.
Yeah. So, part of this is the idea of, yes, your employer is giving you benefits, and it's great. Craig and I are always going to, and we definitely expound and try to, help every employee see the benefit that is being provided, but it's a base. That's sort of a starting point for it. And if we're really talking about, hey, you've got to fill in and be the CEO, well, then there's layers that need to be built on top of that. Because the other thing that happens is a lot of those benefits, Craig, are tied to the employer. And if you're no longer employed, what happens?
Well, you lose those benefits until you find another employer who may offer benefits.
Who may offer or maybe not as robust or whatever the case may be. And that's where this conversation is really built on, is you should not have to worry about that because you're the company.
Yeah.
Go
Tom,
ahead.
the other thing I was going to find too, Tom, is when people do have benefits with their employer, typically they just take advantage of them that they're adequate, or take it for granted that they're adequate. They don't actually know, like, I have disability. Is it short term? Is it long term? What does it cover? You know, what percentage of my pay does it cover if I became disabled?
Right. And well, we're going to go into that because we're going to break them all down. So
right, good.
We will get there. But first thing we're going to start with
percent I'll call you.
Yes, that's right. You got to watch that. The first thing we're going to start with, though, is medical, right? Health insurance. Now, for the most part, most employers out there, with everything that's gone on between, the Affordable Care Act and everything, that most employers are offering health insurance. But one of the things that Craig and I say to everybody about health insurance is sometimes the employer is offering you the opportunity to participate in what is known as a health savings account, otherwise deemed HSA. Right. And a health savings account is different than that flex spending thing, right? This gets a lot of confusion, Greg, sometimes, the flex spending versus the health savings. Flex spending is, yes, I put money in, but I got to use it in this calendar year. I can roll over a portion if I don't spend it, but for the most part, it's a use it or lose it proposition.
Right. It also depends on the plans that are being offered, because sometimes an HSA isn't available unless it's a high deductible plan.
Well, it has to be a high deductible plan. It
Well,
can't be otherwise.
Well, but I'm saying not all organizations may offer that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So sometimes they do. Sometimes it's built in that it's there, but also this may be the opportunity if we're getting to open enrollment to have the conversation to say maybe this makes sense to look at it. And if you're somebody who's in charge, maybe to say, because what the HSA allows you to do is put money in pre-tax. That money then grows tax deferred. And if it's taken out for medical purposes, it's tax free. You can let this roll. It can sit there. And the whole conversation is you can build this up out over time. So when we get to retirement, what do we got, Craig? We've got this bucket of money that's available to pay for my ancillary and other costs, because I'm getting old, so I know I'm going to have to pay for stuff when I'm out there, but I can do it and take it out of this HSA bucket, and it's tax-free to me in retirement.
Right, and it can be used for any medical purpose, including paying premiums on health insurance. So a big thing we get is, I want to retire early, but I'd have to get my own insurance. How do I pay for that? Well, maybe use HSA to buy your own health insurance to bridge that gap until you're 65 and you get on Medicare. So, or maybe you're even older than that and you're looking to do long-term care, right? You're planning for long-term care. You can use this for long-term premiums as well. So it's a very, very flexible, but once again, one of the best vehicles out there from a tax standpoint: pre-tax, tax deferred, tax-free. I mean,
right. It's triple tax. It's a win-win-win. You can't get so that's why the conversation, as we sort of slide to the microscope of the CEO package, that allows you to sort of create this I've got this tax benefit now through my health insurance. Like, that's something that's not available to everybody if I'm doing this. So it's a conversation. If you have it available and you're not taking advantage of it, you need to be looking at that. If you don't have it, maybe it's a conversation with benefits or with HR to say, hey, is this something that you've thought about or being able to offer, type of thing. Next, disability. And this was the one that Craig had started to talk about, right? Because, we run into this a lot. A lot of employers, and God bless them, offer disability. They offer both short-term and long-term disability, which, again, from a planning perspective, is great because it's a fundamental base. If something does happen, at least there's something coming in. The problem is, if the employer is paying for it, Craig, what happens to the benefit?
Oh, they're taxed.
It is taxed. So even if your employer is replacing 60% of your paycheck, when you net it after taxes, you wind up in like the 40% range as a net take home.
Right. The other issue with it is that people don't think about is that if you are contributing, say, your employer 401k plan and there's a match, you're no longer getting that if you're disabled. So your retirement account is no longer building up, even though you've placed a portion of your income. So that's another gap you got to consider if you became disabled.
So the conversation usually is depending on how much you're earning, how much that benefit that the employer is providing, can you offset it? Can you add on so that you're getting additional income? Because sometimes the employer's plan will limit. There'll be a cap on the base. That's why Craig said a lot of times you got to look at what's being there. And the conversation is, can I create my own plan? And should I leave this employer, then be able to spring the plan? So let's say the employer was giving, I'm just using round numbers, my employer's plan was going to give me $4,000 a month. I can buy my own plan to add on to that and get another like 1,500. But if I separate from service, I can actually take the 1,500 plan and spring it and make it 5,500. Ways that you then, if something happens and you change jobs, you've got it in place.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing too, Tom, is that not everybody stays at the same company for 20 years anymore. Although I have heard of some of those recently. A lot of times when people they're laddering themselves, right? They move from company to company to kind of get themselves ahead. So
Right.
a lot of times this package keeps changing and keeps changing. So sometimes owning your own, you make yourself completely portable. No matter where you go, you've got those coverages in place.
Right. And so it's worth having a conversation and looking at it and seeing what the employer is offering, what that benefit actually entails to you, how much of a benefit it's actually going to pay you net, and whether or not it makes sense to say, wait, I can create this own portability window that I can take with me. And should I lose my job, I have the ability to then up it so that if something does happen to me, I'm going to replace all of that income instead of just the small amount that I was using on top of it. So, again, disability is one of those things nobody likes to talk about, but it's an idea to be looking at it from that benefits perspective, from that I've got my CEO coverage. I better make sure I'm responsible for whatever that portion of that household income is, right? Those expenses, Craig.
Yeah, like another one, like my wife, a teacher. I know your wife was a teacher too. And how many teachers I talk to think that disabilities are automatically included in their package, and it's not. You actually have to sign up for it. And
Right.
so remember that just because the company offers a benefit doesn't mean you're automatically enrolled.
Yeah,
You got
absolutely. And so that slides to the next one because it talks right into that whole conversation, which really, this one is more about portability. Right. So most employers are offering some kind of life insurance. We run into that all the time where the conversation, oh yeah, I get life insurance through my employer. Usually it's like a flat number, like 50K or one-time salary type of thing, Craig, right? That's usually what we see.
Yeah, right. So sometimes it depends on the employer. They'll give you, as part of your package, 1 time or 2 times your salary. And sometimes they'll actually offer you the ability to buy up to 3 or 4 or 5 times your salary for a small amount of money. And usually there's no insurability issue there. So it's an automatic.
Right. The problem is that add-on is usually never portable. I mean, most of the
Oh, right. So as long as you're there, you're covered. Once you leave,
there really is no portability. Portability meaning I can take that policy with me when I walk away, right? That's portability. And in the case with life insurance and just like the disability, like, 98, 99% of all the policies are not portable. In some cases, the life insurance may be convertible. That's what the conversion on the screen is talking about. Conversion means, okay, they've got a policy. I can now convert it to something that the company who's doing the policy allows me to make my own policy. The problem is the policy that you had was a group coverage of everybody that was in the bucket. Now it's trying to come out and say, well, we're just going to do it for you. And we got to take your age and your consideration and based on the history inside what's there. And you got to go to this policy. And a lot of times it's not the most user friendly of policies on those conversions, and they tend to be a little bit more expensive because let's face it, this was a group term policy, Greg. They didn't really want the permanent coverage.
Well, the other issue, I've seen this too, that, the conversion is automatic, like it's guaranteed you can convert it. But the issue is they assume, like you said, that group, that you're the worst person in the group, that you're
Right.
the overweight smoker with diabetes, right? And so you're getting charged accordingly. So it may be far more expensive to keep that policy than maybe getting it on your own.
So a lot of times, the idea is to be looking at least having your own policy that's in place. And whether that is a term policy that is then convertible, but something that says, okay, I know that if I am no longer employed tomorrow and I die the week after, my family is going to be taken care of. Because if it's not portable and it's not convertible and you're out of a job and the only insurance that you had was through that employer, and then you got hit by the bus, your family's getting nothing. So this is the conversation to be thinking about it like, well, wait, the CEO's got this whole package. They give them all this stuff. I need to be thinking like that. So there's a conversation there about looking at, I should have my own coverage as well. The employer's coverage is great. That's an add-on. But I should have my own coverage that goes with me.
Well, the other thing too is if they're only giving you 1 to 5 times your pay, is that going to be enough to help your family should you not be around?
Correct. That's a different conversation, right? Like I said, with that flat number, sometimes that's just, they'll just give you, it's a 50,000 type of thing. Like, okay, that's, we're putting you in the ground and we're having a nice party. That's pretty much all that's doing really when you're looking at it. All right. So then we get to the retirement plan. And we're not talking about it from the corporate retirement plan, whoever your employer, whatever your employer is doing or offering to you. We're talking about now you've left, right? So now you've left and you've got this thing that's at the old employer. And there's really 4 things that you can do. There's only 4 options available to you of what you can do with that old employer retirement plan. Option number 1 is you can leave it where it is. I like my old employer. All right, I'm no longer there, but I like the plan. I like the funds. I like the way it is. I can leave it there. You just don't know if it's going to stay there. They may move it. There's all sorts of things that go on, but you can leave it where it is. So long as you have a certain amount of a balance, there's certain balances and rules as far as that is concerned. But let's just say you've got the right to do that. You get a new job, you can roll it to your new employer.
As long as they allow it.
As long as they allow it. And then the other side of that is, one of the conversations here with a lot is, okay, you're going to roll it to new employer. You're going to be at that new employer for the rest of your career. Or as Craig said, are we moving and laddering and doing all these things? And then guess what? You're going to wind up with an old employer plan again. And if you haven't touched the other one, then now we've got a trail of them. And like sometimes that's what happens, Greg, is we sit down and we've got 2, 3, or 4 of these old employer plans that are scattered all over the place. Like, how are you doing any of that?
We just had one person we worked with that had like 10 different IRA accounts. I mean, it was nuts.
You can cash it out, right? Now, this is extreme. This is not something we ever recommend because cashing it out before age 59 and a half, not only is it ordinary income tax, but the federal government's going to hit you with a 10% tax penalty on top of it. And if you're taking an amount that's in a year where you actually had a lot of earnings, now you're triggering a higher tax plus the 10%, you're never going to get it back. The cashing out should be the last desperation heave, Hail Mary, whatever they call it at the end there. Like I'm just punting like at the end. Like I'm just crossing my fingers. That should be the last resort.
Final option, right?
What you should really be looking at is creating your own portable retirement plan. Now, these are called individual retirement accounts, IRAs. That's what they are designed for. It's an individual retirement account, an IRA. This is your own portable retirement plan. And if you think of it going back to example number 1, where, all right, I left my employer, the funds are sitting in the old employer plan, I'm going to my new employer. Instead of just rolling them to my new employer, because then I might wind up with an old employer, if I had an IRA, I can just pour it into the IRA. And now it's a bucket that comes with me. I've got my own portable plan. I control it. I can decide what's happening with it. I have the flexibility to decide how I want to take it out. See, what happens is if you try to take money out of an old employer retirement plan, the Fed is going to hit you, Craig, with a 20% mandatory withholding.
Correct.
No ifs, ands, and no way around that. They're going to federal, it's 20, and then if you got a state like here in Massachusetts who's got his hand out, that's another 5. You're losing a quarter of your distribution just right out of the gate. And if you're under 59 and a half, add another 10% to it. With an IR, go ahead.
So you might get some of that back though, depending on your tax filing status at the end of the year, but you're not going to have it at that point where you're saying I need it. That's the issue.
And depending if you had earnings in that year, you might be bumping yourself into a higher tax bracket and then you wouldn't get it back.
Right. So you really want to weigh the consequences of doing something along those lines. Absolutely.
Right.
Yep.
So the IRA is a strategy that depends on you, depends on the individual, but from a CEO perspective, this is your own portable plan. This is something you're taking with you. This is something that you can do on your own. And speaking of that, one of the things that CEOs get is they get their own personal plans, their own personal pension plans. And and the whole thing with retirement is that retirement is all about cash flow. See, because cash flow equals certainty, and certainty takes the pressure off of money. CEOs, they defer this stuff, right, Greg? They defer their money off into the future for a promissory note that's going to get paid out for them for the rest of their lives.
Well, once again, they understand, how money works. They understand that creating cash flow, that's going to be coming in every year, like you said, takes the pressure off of everything else. So you're not worried, am I going to run out of money? Or what is my paycheck going to be when I retire?
Right.
So really about having different income sources. And that kind of pension is one source of income that every retirement specialist says you should have in your portfolio.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll talk about that in a second, right? Before we get into that though, just for everybody who's out there, just quickly, if you ever want to have a conversation about any of this, or just, hey, look, I don't know what my benefits are. I don't know what they mean. We're happy to have a conversation with you about that. Let's set up a time, let's chat, let's go through it. Let's take a look at the benefits that are being offered, see what you're getting, see what you should do and how to do it. There's no cost, it's complimentary. You can either shoot the QR code or that link is right on the screen. You can just copy and paste that. We're happy to set up a time and meet with anybody and have a conversation about that.
I promise we'll always meet with you before happy hour.
So. Yes. All right, so what would that look like, right? So for most of us, that personal income, that personal pension plan, it's really Social Security. For W-2 employees, that's pretty much what you get, right? It's I'm putting money in, and the whole idea is that the government's going to promise to pay me a certain amount of money at some future date, whether I'm 62 or 67 or 70 years old, they're going to pay me this money. Because most employers today don't have pensions. So most employees don't have pension plans anymore. So you're left to, well, how do I do that then? Right? And as Craig said, that whole idea, that whole concept of creating that income stream that is never going to run out is probably the biggest thing with retirement, right? That's that whole cash flow end of things, Craig.
Yeah, the other question I've heard it even just today is Social Security still going to be there when I retire? And I think I hear that more and more lately. But I know everybody has their own opinion about it, but yeah, I think it will absolutely be there for the long run. I think it's just a matter of will it look the same.
Right. What it'll be like, what the numbers will be, what the ages will be, all of that stuff as they go through and revamp it. But that's part of the conversation, right? And so when you're doing that and be thinking about how am I designating, how am I setting up my income? How am I getting my retirement done, right? So we have our tax deferred bucket. That's the retirement plan. I'm pouring money into my 401k or my 403b or whatever is being offered by my employer.
Yep.
I've got an after-tax bucket. That's money that's sitting in the bank or maybe sitting in a brokerage account, or God bless if you've got it in crypto, whatever it is, in terms of dealing with that, that's your after-tax bucket. And then there's that guaranteed bucket. And these are the three buckets that you need to be thinking about, because that's how you're going to build this income stream, right, Craig? This is how you're going to build it out into retirement.
Yeah, and there's a reason to have all three of these. And I've seen people who pile all their money into one method or the other. And I'm not saying that that's, necessarily the best way to do it. And the reason being is because you don't know in the future what the tax code will be. I mean, if nothing, the only thing we can tell you for absolute certain is things will change. How they will change, we just don't know. So if you have money in different types of buckets, like the three we were talking about here, then you've got the ability to bob and weave. You've got some flexibility in your retirement plan when you get to that stage. And that's very crucial too.
Right. It's absolutely a part of thinking of how you're designing this, how you're designing that income stream, and how you're doing it. Okay. So it's you incorporated, right? And so the idea should be, I've created this benefits package now because I'm the CEO. I need to have this benefits package so that I don't have to, like Craig said, I don't have to think about this stuff. I can focus on the other parts of my world that I've got to deal with. That's why they create these packages, because they want them entirely focused on whatever it is that they have to do. And as Craig said, this takes all the pressure off of that. And just by doing that, that's going to take pressure off of you. Knowing that this stuff is set out into the future, or that I'm taking care of this part or that thing, or God forbid, if something happens and I get hurt or I get, I was going to say hit by the bus, but hit by the bus, that everybody around me is going to be okay. That's what this is about creating your own package for that.
The other reason you do it too is not just because of the financial aspect, it's also because of the stress, right? Sometimes we live with the stress of not knowing. If something happens, something will happen to my family. It maybe not be top of mind. It's maybe not like the thing that's pressing on you all day, but in the back of your head, when you relax at night, when you're taking a vacation, you start going, well, what if this happened? What if that happened? Right. And then by having these things in place, and so you can put that bag down and deal with other things. And so that's why you don't like to look in the dark corners. And protection planning is one of the last things people actually want to talk about, because, well, I'm spending money, but I'm not getting anything back. Well, you're getting security for your family and peace of mind for yourself. So there's things to keep in mind when you're putting the stuff together.
And that is, as Craig said, a great way to alleviate that stress. It's a big stress reliever with that. Mm-hmm. So what we do, like we said, specifically if it's, hey, I never really, like Craig said, what happens most of the time we talk to people, they've never looked at their benefits package. They signed up when they got hired, and then they just sort of forgot about it. And every year they get this notice, but it's like, okay, I'm just doing the same thing and not really thinking about what it is I'm doing or what I should be doing.
My clients still don't, Tom. They send it to me and I read it for them.
Yeah. That type of thing.
How many of these books I've read? It's like crazy.
So we're happy to do that. Like I said, just, you can just shoot the QR code, use the link, set up a time to chat. We're happy to go through it. Happy to have a conversation to see what you're doing, when you're doing, how you're doing, and whether or not it makes sense to be looking at, well, gee, the base package is good, but like Craig said, maybe there's some places you can fill in and add in on your own. And that's the idea behind it. So we keep the idea of Think with a Drink going. This is what's on tap, what's coming up. Next week, we're doing 5 questions on life insurance. This is questions that have come to us from people that we talk to, from audience, from other presentations. 3-9, because we're in the middle of tax filing season and we keep getting questions on taxes, how to reduce your taxable income. And 3-16, because Craig just wants to keep playing in the holiday mindset. It ain't easy getting green, not being green, getting green, because this next day is St. Patty's Day. So we're going to do a little St. Patty's Day celebration on 3-16.
I am a little Irish, so.
There you go. I think everybody's a little Irish, certainly on St. Patrick's Day, right? That's the whole thing. Everybody's a little Irish. So if you ever have any questions, you can go to the website. It's www.ariesfoundation.org. You can email us. It's info@ariesfoundation.org. But we always suggest the easiest thing to do, shoot that QR code. It's going to open up the calendar. You can schedule a time, and we'll just talk with you one-on-one and just see with a chat whether or not we can help you out or give you some guidance or some advice in terms of what you're doing. And on that, I'm going to say thanks, everybody, and have a great evening.
Thank you.